Welcome, Uniters, and welcome all. It is a great honor for me today to be joined by two extraordinary Americans who are doing extraordinary work in this time of great despair and fear across the country. COVID, as we all know, has changed the way we live, has damaged our families, the culture in our country, the fabric of our sense of belonging, our hope in the future, our sense of safety, our families, and more. But it has not stopped great Americans from responding, trying to bring the country together and working hard to create a voice and a sense of confidence that one call to action and one unified effort can defeat it. And today, I'm joined by my friend of more than 20 years, John Bridgeland, the former head of President Bush's Domestic Policy Council and the co-founder and CEO of something called the COVID Collaborative, joined with him together with former Governor Deval Patrick, great governor of the great state of Massachusetts, and now the co-chair of the COVID Collaborative, an effort to bring the leading voices in our country together so that we can find out once and for all what the direction and hopes and dreams and actions are that we all need to take to defeat this scourge. Welcome, Bridge, and welcome, Governor Patrick.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Bridge, you know, all three of us are private citizens. You're both involved in this founding effort. Tell us what started your vision of bringing the country together and why this mantle has fallen to you.
Well, interestingly, Tim, it began with your call to unite on May 1st, when in the absence of really national leadership in times of a national crisis, which is so desperately needed, to have, a single powerful voice calming the country, strengthening our resolve. You brought together people from different backgrounds, sectors, former presidents, and we had actually former presidents issuing calls to unite that went viral. And about a month later, after that extraordinary event where we raised, millions of dollars for the American people to help frontline healthcare workers and increased volunteerism, and also brought this sense of unity across our divisions, some business leaders and governors called and said, could you all do something on COVID response? And my first reaction was, well, a pandemic that crosses state borders is something that's uniquely the function of the federal government. And yet, as we thought about it, one of the first people I called was Governor Deval Patrick, who just represents the American spirit that transcends divides. And so we've tapped top experts in health, education, and the economy across administrations, across levels of government, in philanthropy, the business and nonprofit sectors, to make common cause on something called the COVID.
You say top experts, you've got surgeons general, you've got seated governors, you've got mayors, you've got all these people coming together, which is remarkable in this day and age.
What's interesting about it is a lot of them were working in isolation, even within academic institutions. And the first person we talked to said, Bridge, Deval, collaboration is an unnatural act among non-consenting adults.
That was me.
We both laughed. And then 2 months later, in large part thanks to Governor Patrick and Governor Kempthorne and a lot of extraordinary people, we have FDA commissioners, CDC directors, former Health and Human Services secretaries, Homeland Security secretaries, secretaries of education, and then the groups representing the diversity of the United States, which really Deval, brought to us in all of its wonder.
So this is the COVID Collaborative yesterday launched, Governor Patrick, this call to action, call to distribution of vaccines and therapeutics, a call to unified responses and investments in increasing supply chain. But most of the country looks at governors and sees people that don't get along with each other, that looks at our public officials and sees people that just think I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, therefore I should be for this or against that.
Right.
How did you manage to pull so many voices together and counter that narrative with a more inclusive or unified one?
Tim, I have to tell you, I in my experience, emergencies they tend to concentrate the mind, and they at their best are occasions where people turn to each other rather than on each other. And never in my wildest dreams, Bridge and I have talked about this, could I have imagined that a national public health emergency would be politicized in the way this one has been. And I think all the rhetoric aside, governors who are, and other local officials, state and local officials, and many at the federal level, know that we need a common, comprehensive response on everything from testing and tracing to strategies for distributing an eventual vaccine. So it wasn't that that there was real resistance to developing the need and helping to fill that void. And frankly, when you got on the phone with individual political leaders, individual public health and education leaders, business leaders, and so forth, making the case was pretty straightforward. I think the call with, leaders of the NAACP or the Urban League, for example, to ask them to sign on may have taken all of 10 minutes. They got it right away.
Wow. But so, Governor, you've been in decision-making roles in the middle of crises. You know that people are getting pulled in different directions. Most Americans are just saying, yeah, but look at this person in South Dakota, or look at this person in New York, or look at this person in Florida. They're not doing the right thing, or they're pushing too hard, or they're not pushing hard enough. How do we break through the clutter of so much tension to help Americans have some confidence again in their leadership? It's a huge challenge, right?
It's a huge question, Tim. I do think that, again, I think crises are an opportunity to call people to common cause. We have a virus, as Bridge said, that doesn't recognize state lines, and frankly, we have science which has increasingly come to consensus about what some of the most effective strategies are to both keep us safe and enable regular life to resume. Right. And bringing those together has been the calling of the collaborative, and I think it's just been so great that governors from the Democratic side and from the Republican side have signed on, and more will. And I will tell you, it was purposeful, and this was Bridge, really. It was purposeful to organize this across bipartisan lines, so to organize it in a bipartisan way. Dirk Kempthorne, a Republican, former governor of Idaho, is a co-chair with me. I'm a Democrat and former governor of Massachusetts, and we have really, really been intentional about asking folks kind of one-to-one. We get one Democrat, we get one Republican, just to assure that there was balance so that we could start to transcend this hyper-partisanship that has, I think, diminished our ability to respond successfully to beating the pandemic.
But so, is it possible? I mean, you guys have both served at the highest levels of leadership in your respective parties. And some 80% of Americans think we are hopelessly divided by politics. And here you are on the screen together, sharing, I assume, fundamental beliefs about the country, fundamental commitments to the health and safety of Americans, regardless of party, fundamental alignment around response strategies. Why is this so hard to do? Why is this tearing us apart when it should be? It seems like it should be so simple. Bridge, what?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a faulty view of leadership, actually. I think we put our hopes too much in politicians to define our problems, solve our problems, and then we're so sorely disappointed when, of course, democracy in America, as was recognized, a century and a half ago, is really also ground up. And so I think what Deval and Dirk and I have been trying to do is, in a sense, put in place a new model of leadership. America's a big country, as Hugh Price likes to say, and why not use leadership to tap the ingenuity and entrepreneurship and creativity of America's experts and leaders and institutions across sector. And to your point, you're right, there are people in the country who don't want to be wearing masks. They're libertarian, they value their freedom. There are Republicans who've been stoked by a president who is, trying to have a different view on the COVID response. When Governor Christie attended that super spreader event at the White House and didn't wear a mask, we learned that he spent 7 days in the ICU and almost died. And now Republican governors in deep red states are inviting him to speak to their constituents about, if you really want your freedom, if you want your schools to reopen, your workplaces to reopen and get back to normal life, wear a mask. And it's working.
So you're suggesting that the legendary former head of the Urban League, Hugh Price, the former governor of New Jersey and close Trump advisor, Chris Christie, Republican governors in deep red states, that they all have a shared vision or view potentially. I mean, am I hearing you correctly? Because I think for a lot of Americans, they're just like, what?
Yeah.
You just saw, is that actually possible?
I'd build on this if I may.
Yeah.
You know, Bridge is careful to talk about tapping the ingenuity of individuals, of different regions of the country. This is not a set of mandates. It's a set of guidelines. And that is what has been the problem. There are all kinds of different ways, less so in the context of whether or not to wear a mask, but lots of ways to adapt behaviors to these guidelines. But there is consensus about what science demands. And that has gotten completely overtaken by the drama of trying to respond. And I'd say just this one other thing. If it's true that in all of these jobs of being an elected official or running for office or some blend of substance and performance art, it seems to me that the substance has gotten less and less attention, and the performance art, the drama, has been inflated. And that is the thing that people confuse as leadership. And we're trying to get that back in balance. We understand that folks have to do what they need to do or think they need to do to appeal to their constituents, but it can't overtake the well-being of the people we serve, the long-term health of our communities and our economies. And if we get together on what the guardrails are for leadership and have those guardrails established by science and common sense and common interests, that will produce, we hope, and has produced among those who've supported us, a different kind and much more hopeful kind of leadership.
So people should go to COVID Collaborative, the website, to check out all the guidelines, as Governor Patrick is saying, the ways in which we can all respond. So many people are confused, frustrated. What do I do? There's tons of information there about what you can do, how you can adapt your concerns and interests, how you can anticipate the changes in science and behavior, how you can help save lives. But I want to get back to this thing. I was talking to a professor the other day, Rosabeth Moss-Cantor. She's a business school professor, and she was telling me, you know, sports teams that are on losing streaks have one thing in common. Made me think of this, Governor Patrick. She said they almost always end up hoarding and distorting information. And that leads to losing streaks because people start to assume and conspire, and it feels like at some level, the country is on a losing streak. And part of it is exactly what you've just said, which is, you know, the information's confused. We're more caught up in theatrics and name calling and point making rather than actually understanding things. Where do we look to break this losing streak? Who do you guys look to for a future that can get us out of this losing streak, get us some wins as a country, and get us some confidence back? Where's your confidence coming from, Governor Patrick? What's bringing you hope?
Well, I'm actually very hopeful about the incoming administration. I think Joe Biden.
Are you going to be in it? That's the question I'm supposed to ask.
No, I'm not going to be. I'm not going to be in it. But thank you for asking, and it's nice to be talked about.
We love to see you.
Thank you. I'm going to be rooting for it. And you know, I will say to the dismay, I'm sure, of many of my fellow Democrats, I was not rooting for the failure of the Trump administration. We should want our leaders to succeed, because if they are leading, if they are serving us, that is to all of our benefit. I think that the difference is that, as President-elect Biden said on election night, or one of the nights when the next milestone was called, that he intended to be the president of those who voted for him as well as those who did not. That's the start. And I think being that kind of leader means you have to listen to folks who may not already agree with you, and encourage and model that kind of behavior for others.
Bridge, if you were back in 2000 and you got told, hey, listen, we need you to run the Domestic Policy Council, and the president-elect was calling you in and saying, take this over, how would you go about doing exactly what Governor Patrick just suggested we need? How would you go about listening to the other side? What are the steps people in the West Wing of the White House could take right now to build back trust, confidence, bottom up and top down, a sense of purpose?
I'd say first, I too am encouraged that the president-elect, and I'm a Republican, won on a message of unity and character and restoring the soul of America. I mean, that says something actually about maybe how polarized the country really is. I think deep down, people recognize that common humanity and that common goodwill, particularly in times of crisis. I do think that there needs to be some kind of structure within the White House, some kind of White House Office of American Possibilities or Civic Renewal or something, Tim, that you should run that actually taps and
I'm
unleashes.
interviewing you today.
I love it. I love it.
It actually taps, is a plot. I think what Deval and I have discovered is America doesn't have enough platforms from which extraordinary people can come together to make common cause, to work to support, inform their government and civil society. And we're even doing it on COVID, of all things, unexpectedly. So I think if the White House, actually the president-elect, advances this concrete idea of restoring the soul of America and create some mechanisms within his government and with his leadership so that takes concrete form, I think that could be extraordinary on a whole host of issues. COVID, national.
Such a cool idea. Extraordinary.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
I love that. If I can just add on on a long-term basis, I would love to see national service become more the norm, and in fact, universally available, and paid in a way that anybody could participate. Because I think, one of the reasons why we are so divided, or one of the reasons that concerns me about our division, is that it was so easy to accomplish. And it's easy to accomplish because we don't know each other. Folks in one part of the country think they know somebody from a different part of the country or a different background based on the cartoon version that gets painted in the media, and it's just not so. And so the idea of working alongside someone from a different perspective and a different background and a different part of the country in service of America's unmet needs, I think is a powerful frame and a powerful opportunity to start to restore some sense of common cause over time.
Governor, one of the clear stories in this COVID crisis is the story of inequalities. We've seen the soaring rates of infection and death in our Black and brown brothers and sisters, our Native communities, many of those hardest hit by not only racism, but also poverty. The COVID Collaborative is about bringing the country together. Can we also, in some ways, use this crisis when we return back, we hope someday soon, to a normal world, to actually fix some of these deep, or at least start the healing aggressively around some of these age-old problems that have dogged us since before we were even a country?
Well, first of all, I am deeply committed to and I deeply believe that these are problems that we can surmount. And I think in part because, there isn't a single problem we face that we didn't create. And so it has to be within our capacity to care about them and to solve them. They will not be solved, I believe, by just kind of papering them over or going back to normal beyond the sense that you mean, which is being safe and able to be in the company of other people. We have to face some hard truths, and facing those hard truths doesn't mean any of us love our country less, that we have fewer aspirations for American freedom and equality. It means actually that we confront some of the persistent barriers in reality and in attitude that keep us from meeting our highest aspirations. And frankly, when we are working intentionally in this country to close the gap between our reality and our ideals, that is when our strength flourishes at home and abroad.
Beautiful. It's such a good thing to hear two Americans committed to our highest aspirations, our highest ideals, as you just said, Governor Patrick, willing to put themselves on the line when there's a gap, as Americans have done historically at our best. People have taken the challenge themselves. And when they didn't see their government meeting it, they did what Americans have always been able to do, which is to step forward. And that's what both of you have done. So from the Unite community, this community is small, but growing and passionate community of people who actually believe that we have more in common than that divides us. We don't just believe it, but we act upon it. I want to thank both of you for acting, but even more than acting, for believing and having the faith in our country and in each other necessary to make a real difference with this COVID work. So it's the COVID Collaborative. It's out. It's for all Americans, whether no matter what your political party is. Check it out. Join us. Contribute. And most of all, take care of yourselves and each other, and respond in the best way you know how to helping us defeat this terrible scourge. So thanks, Bridge. Thanks, Governor Patrick. And
thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Let's keep the work going.